I have just learned that my husband is the fifth prince of the current dynasty, and my grievances have been vindicated. I shall return to the capital shortly. Awaiting his arrival is his fiancée, the legitimate daughter of the duke's residence. Shitong. Only those who ascend to the status of royal consort are deemed worthy. Our marital standing holds no significance. Yor has waited for me for 2 years, and her willingness to grant you the title of a concubine is already a considerable concession. He urged me to pack my belongings, as he would take me back to the capital in a few days. I have no desire to go to the capital. He responded with impatience. Where else can you go without me? He is unaware that, apart from the capital, I possess other destinations. My father has sent me a pass. I can exit the borders to engage in trade, and from henceforth, the world is vast and free, allowing for a joyful parting. 1. I made my way home with a basket of steamed buns, just as Xie Jiuxiao was stepping out of the door. The once faded green robe had been replaced with resplendent embroidered garments and a jade crown adorning his hair, exuding an indescribable air of pride and nobility. I had recently learned that he was the fifth prince of the current dynasty, his name cleared of all injustices, as the emperor had decreed his return to the capital. Awaiting him was his betrothed from the capital, a fact that had eluded my knowledge until now. Sangyu stood behind him, graceful and dignified, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Xie Jiuxiao took a step forward, his voice cool and detached. Shitong. The one who ascends to the ranks of the royal consorts is the prince's wife. Our marital status holds no weight. Yor has waited for me for 2 years. Her willingness to accept a lesser position as your concubine is already a considerable concession. Pack your belongings. In a few days, you shall accompany me back to the capital. My gaze lingered on their intertwined fingers. He seemed eager to present Sangyu to the world, possibly at the cost of her dignity. The depth of his affection for Sangyu was palpable, a mutual devotion I had never experienced. When he turned to me, the warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by an icy coldness akin to the lingering frost of early spring. I remained silent for a long while before asking again, "Are we not husband and wife?" His eyes flickered momentarily, lips parting slightly, before he finally uttered 2 words, "Not counted." I nodded, albeit slowly, and inquired, "Is it possible for us to forego going to the capital?" He paused, a frown creasing his brow, his patience wearing thin as he replied, "Do not cause a scene. You are a merchant's daughter. Being a prince's concubine is already my greatest concession. Without me, where else could you go?" I lifted my head and spoke softly. "Very well." I then turned and busied myself. During the Ghost Festival this month, few ventured out, and the steamed buns were not selling well, leaving me with a surplus. I needed to save them for tomorrow's sale. I lowered my head, gathering my burden. No one witnessed the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. Xie Jiuxiao, nonchalant, remarked, "Do not bother with those buns. They are hardly worth your effort and need not be consumed again." I feigned ignorance and continued my task. Beneath my load lay a letter I had received from the post office today. It was from my father, who had established trade routes between Daliang and the western regions, inviting me to join him in commerce. Enclosed was also a pass. I was not without options. I could cross borders for trade, and from then on, the world would be vast and free, a parting filled with joy for both. 2 years prior, I had accompanied a caravan to the western Hunan to sell salt when I encountered Xie Jiuxiao. He was among the displaced, mingling with a group of refugees, stumbling along the path until he twisted his ankle and collapsed into a ditch. No one cared. In that ditch, he bore scars from past battles, his clothes tattered. Clutching my sleeve, he looked at me with hope. "Miss, please save me." After washing his face, I was taken aback. Xie Jiuxiao was indeed a handsome young man. Despite my many travels with my father, I had never seen anyone as striking as he. I stood stunned for a moment, my cheeks flushing. He told me he was from the capital, a scholar whose family had been implicated in a treasonous plot, leading to the confiscation of their estate and his descent into destitution. "Please, miss, save me, and I will repay your kindness." For him, I paused my journey in Shu, renting a courtyard to care for him. Neighbors remarked on his aloofness, suggesting he might not feel grateful. I merely smiled. One day, while I was out shopping, I casually brought him a folding fan. As he slowly unfolded it, his eyes sparkled, and he gently asked, "You are so kind to me." "I do not know how to repay you," I jokingly replied. "Then perhaps you should marry me." He responded, "Very well." Before the spring festival, he brazenly set up a stall at the market to write couplets, earning a modest sum to craft a copper hairpin for me, a design of his own making. He said, lacking material possessions to offer as a betrothal gift, he could only present this hairpin, a token to bind my 3,000 strands of hair. I felt like I had found a treasure. I wrote to my father, informing him that I had found my ideal partner and would no longer travel with the caravan. Thus, I became a wife, blessed with a husband. Half a month ago, a young lady of noble birth arrived in town, the legitimate daughter of a duke from the capital, traveling south for health reasons. As the talk of the town, I could not help but bring her up at the dinner table. At that time, Xie Juxiao remained indifferent, uttering merely, "No talk during meals." He had always been sparing with words towards me. However, one evening, as dusk descended, I caught sight of the young lady weeping beneath the willows, and Xie Juxiao holding her in his embrace. A surge of heated blood rushed to my head. What was I thinking? Should I have acted like the fruit vendor next door, seizing a firewood stick and confronting them? But a scuffle between two women would be too undignified. I fell silent. Perhaps I had misjudged? If not, I foolishly thought, despite Xie Juxiao's remarkable talent, he was still a refugee, while that young lady was a woman of high birth. Even if they shared some hidden affection, they could never truly unite. Yes, that must be it. Miss Sang remained sheltered and seldom emerged. I never saw Xie Juxiao meet with her again. Until one day, on my birthday, I closed my stall early, eager to return home for the celebration. The night before, I found a new hairpin beneath my pillow. Elated, I hurried home, only to receive a cotton handkerchief from Xie Juxiao, who bore his usual indifferent expression. "You make steamed buns. Your hands will get greasy. This will be useful. I am rather short on funds, and have nothing of better worth." Yet, the hairpin I had longed for appeared the next day in Miss Sang's hairdo. She visited to buy steamed buns. The gentle breeze stirred the willows as she remarked, "I truly envy you." Others, hearing this, found it nonsensical. But in that moment, I understood. A wave of bitterness washed over me. She left with red-rimmed eyes, while that night, Xie Juxiao returned with tears in his own. He was heavily intoxicated. I rushed to support him, but he shrugged me off, sending me sprawling to the ground. Watching him stagger, he fumbled for a folding fan among the boxes. Mistaking the fan for me, he vented his pent-up resentment, fueled by alcohol. "Mu Shitong, you shamelessly demand repayment for your kindness, insisting I marry you. Had it not been for you, I would have preferred to die in that ditch rather than become this heartless, ungrateful hypocrite." The usually composed Xie Juxiao had tears shimmering in his eyes. "I have wronged her. I have hurt her. She should not have waited for me." His tone dripped with bitterness. It turned out, Miss Sang was his fiancée, who had waited in the capital for 2 long years. Their mutual affection was evident, yet I had unwittingly intruded upon their bond. Clutching the fan, he tore it violently, the sound of fabric ripping echoing in the stillness of the night. My heart shattered alongside it. I stood frozen, too stunned to make a sound. Afterward, Xie Juxiao sat alone in the courtyard, staring vacantly at the full moon, murmuring "Ewer" before succumbing to drunkenness and falling into a deep sleep. I stood beneath the eaves, tears streaming down my cheeks, unable to contain my sorrow any longer. The mountain breeze was chilling, seeping into my bones. Xie Juxiao, in his inebriation, would remember nothing. Yet, he glanced at the remnants of the fan he had shredded and, as if nothing had happened, quietly picked it up and returned it to the box. He asked me nothing, and I mentioned nothing. But we both understood that some things had irrevocably changed. For, half a month later, a group of solemn-faced guards appeared, their presence overwhelming as they surrounded my home. They had come to welcome the 5th prince back to the capital. At the forefront of the crowd stood Sengyu, her eyes shimmering with tears. Yesterday, they could only meet in secret, fearful of tarnishing her reputation. Today, they could finally present themselves openly for all to see. Simply because Sengyu is betrothed to Xie Juxiao, destined to become the future consort of the 5th prince. As for me, I am merely an unrecognized country wife, without matchmakers or formal engagement. After Xie Juxiao uttered his words, he turned and commanded a group of guards to erect 2 tents in the courtyard, one for himself and one for Sengyu. He stated that he would need a few days to settle matters, after which we would return to the capital together. leaving Sangyu to await him here instead of returning to her duke's residence. From that day forth, Siejio Xiao ceased to enter my quarters. And this suited me just fine. He remained unaware that I had penned a letter to my father. In 5 days, I would depart the city. And within half a month, I would rendezvous with him at the western gate. I set down my pen and tucked the letter into my sleeve. At that moment, Siejio Xiao entered with a stern expression, followed timidly by Sangyu, whose complexion appeared somewhat pallid. Siejio Xiao, visibly agitated, coldly inquired, "Did I not instruct you to cease making pancakes? You are aware of how greasy they are? Your feels nauseous just from the smell." Behind me lay the kitchen, where the stove radiated warmth, simmering a meat filling that wafted its savory aroma for miles. When I had rescued him, my first meal for him was pancakes. His eyes had sparkled as he declared it the most exquisite delicacy he had ever tasted. He had praised my culinary skills, lauding the way I managed both finances and household affairs with such deftness. He claimed he would never tire of it. I lingered for a moment, noticing Sangyu's complexion pale further as she pressed a handkerchief to her mouth, repeatedly retching. Siejio Xiao, both concerned and infuriated, commanded, "Extinguish the stove immediately." His tone was cold and resolute. I resisted, wishing to sell pancakes for a few more days to gather additional travel funds. The northern frontier is quite distant. My face remained expressionless as I replied firmly, "This is my home. If she does not reside here, she will not be bothered by it." Sangyu's delicate brows furrowed, and her eyes turned slightly red as she timidly tugged at his sleeve. "Fifth brother, please do not make things difficult for Miss Mu. It is my fault. Although I have been in Shu for some time, my constitution is weak. I must be unaccustomed to the climate. I shall return to the other residence and await you." Siejio Zhao's expression darkened further. "She has no right to drive you away. This is but a trivial matter. Can I not protect you from it?" Sang Yu's gaze flickered, and she lowered her head in bashfulness, her face flushed from his understated defense. I clenched the letter hidden in my sleeve. In the sweltering heat of July, I felt an inexplicable chill. She was gentle and kind, while I appeared to be the villainous, aggressive one, attempting to expel the lady of the house. It was only a few days, after all. A slight loss of silver mattered little. At worst, I could sell this house and never return to Shu again. I remained silent, acquiescing, and crossed the threshold. "Where are you going?" As I brushed past, Siejio Xiao blocked my path. I looked up and replied softly, "To deliver a letter to my father." "Is that not permissible?" He released my arm, seemingly uninterested in the contents of my letter. He presumed I was informing my father that I was merely a favored concubine of a prince, enjoying wealth and luxury. The letter was sent off effortlessly. Upon my return, the aroma of pancakes had long dissipated. The chickens and ducks in the backyard were joyfully devouring a large basket of them. Meanwhile, the stove was occupied with Sangyu's medicinal dishes. I busied myself alone with my belongings, cotton garments, cloaks, and boots, a hodgepodge of items. Just as I picked up a cerulean robe, torn between decisions, Siejio Xiao entered. He frowned. "There is no need for such shabby items in the prince's residence." I pressed my lips together and inquired, "What of this?" Siejio Xiao glanced at the clothing in my hands with indifference. He had forgotten. During his exile, he had developed a lingering ailment, particularly sensitive to the cold. Last winter, the chill in Shu was so severe that even wearing cotton garments felt inadequate. I had trekked through the snow to procure 2 wolf pelts from a hunter, nearly losing feeling in my legs from the cold. After enduring several sleepless nights, I had crafted him a winter coat, intricately embroidered with 2 clusters of green bamboo at the cuffs. I had learned Shu embroidery solely for his sake. Siejio Zhao's lips moved slightly, apart from disdain. His expression revealed nothing more. I smiled softly and set the garments aside. At that moment, Sangyu approached, her voice as melodious as a lark. "Fifth brother, look at this silk from Jiangnan. Could you help me choose a pleasing color? This fabric is light and soft, a rare find." Sangyu stepped gracefully forward. Her complexion now rosy, no longer bothered by the scent of pancakes, standing beside Siejio Xiao like a delicate flower. Upon noticing my pallor, she hesitated, her voice quavering. "Fifth brother, am I interrupting?" After glancing at the garments spread across the table, she explained, "Miss Mu may not be aware, but there are strict regulations regarding royal attire. Not just any clothing can be worn. Wearing these would likely invite ridicule and tarnish fifth brother's reputation. Her gaze flickered, and I turned my eyes to the window, where the green willows and slanting sunlight rendered the two of them a perfect match, both exuding an air of nobility. Xie Xiao remarked, "You are a country girl and unaware of court customs. In the future, let Yuer instruct you." I forced a bitter smile and replied softly, "I understand." Sang Yu smiled kindly at me, her demeanor gentle and considerate. "My brother entrusted this matter to me. I shall ensure it is done well." Xie Zhao's voice was filled with affection. "Then I shall trouble you." After they departed, I rummaged through Xie Zhao's belongings, his personal effects, and writing materials, organizing everything before packing them into a trunk. If he no longer desired them, so be it. I could sell them for some travel funds. "Could you kindly convey to the prince whether he still wishes to keep these items?" I unfurled the contents of the cloth bag. As a prince, Xie Xiao was bound by numerous protocols, and I had to announce my presence before seeing him. The guard lazily cast a glance and entered Xie Zhao's tent, returning within the time it took to brew tea. He stated, "The fifth prince says he no longer wants the items. You may dispose of them as you wish." I nodded slightly. He didn't even glance my way. Without hesitation, I harnessed the donkey cart and sold everything to the pawnshop within half a day. I then purchased a new assortment of items, large and small. When I returned home, I was laden with winter garments, furs, and saddles. Yet no one showed interest in questioning me. The guards and maidservants averted their gazes. Only as I walked away did I catch snippets of disdainful remarks. Opportunities to ascend from humble beginnings to wealth are few, suddenly becoming affluent. Who can resist the urge to splurge? Poor miss. She must now call such a person her sister. I could not help but quicken my pace, casting those words far behind me. Now, I was merely in need of a fine steed. The neighbor had long desired my pancake recipe, and I sold it for 2 taels before taking my little donkey to the horse market. The market was bustling. Most of the customers were merchants seeking sturdy horses for transport, knowledgeable about which horses had strength and endurance. After surveying the area, I finally settled on an unassuming horse and began to haggle. The old man stroked his grizzled beard. "You have a keen eye, young lady, but this silver is insufficient. Perhaps you could consider this other horse?" The old man pointed to a nearby white horse, but it was already claimed by someone else. Sang Yu's delicate voice rang out amidst the clamor of the market, particularly bright. "Fifth brother, this horse is beautiful. What do you think?" Xie Xiao sat atop another horse, leaning down with a smile, his face radiating affection. "As long as you like it, you may have it." Sang Yu suddenly turned to me. "Miss Mu?" Upon seeing me, Xie Xiao adjusted his horse's position, his brows knitting together as he asked, "What brings you here?" I tugged the reins in my hand and answered straightforwardly, "I am selling a donkey. It lacks the stamina for long distances." Xie Xiao took my words at face value. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon my hairpin, and he squinted slightly, momentarily lost in thought. His voice tightened. "Where is your hairpin?" I instinctively touched my hair. The pursuit of beauty has always captivated women, and over the past few years, I have acquired a considerable collection of jewelry. However, the copper hairpin he gifted me remains dear to my heart, and regardless of the changing seasons, I adorn my hair with it. I take great care to keep it polished and free of rust. Looking up, I spoke softly. "Oh, didn't your guard just inquire about you?" "All mere trinkets, unworthy of my station," he replied dismissively, his tone betraying a hint of irritation. "I have no need for them." At his words, a flicker of annoyance crossed Xie Xiao's face, his eyes narrowing with a hint of indignation as he retorted, "Mere trinkets?" He swiftly dismounted and stepped closer, asserting, "That is precious to me." Suddenly, Sang Yu gasped, "Fifth brother." Her horse, startled, teetered as if it would throw her. In an instant, Xie Xiao spun around and seized the reins, steadying the animal with ease before gently assisting her down. Sang Yu, still shaken, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Fifth brother, this horse seems averse to human contact. I feel rather frightened." "Let us find another," he replied, his thoughts evidently shifting away from our previous exchange. The irritation on his face dissipated, and his focus turned solely to Sang Yu as he ambiguously stated to me, "Very well, if it is sold, then so be it. Upon our return to the capital, I shall acquire a golden hairpin for you," he added, turning his head. Yet I had already turned away. Sang Yu tugged at his sleeve. Fifth brother, look over there. That horse is beautiful. You once promised to teach me to ride. I have waited 2 years for this. You must teach me in the coming days. It was only then that Xie Jiuxiao seemed to regain his awareness and redirected his gaze. Once they had moved away, I turned to the old man. Will the silver, along with my donkey, suffice to purchase that horse? The shopkeeper regarded me and then the donkey, nodding in agreement. They were to saunter into the capital to procure their horse, while I intended to take the western gate. 2 days before our departure from the capital, a maidservant, witnessing my preparations, could not help but murmur, "Miss, you have sold a batch of old belongings and bought new ones. Yet, to my eye, they bear no distinction from the previous ones. The style and fabric are rather humble. I doubt the fifth prince would take a liking to them," she stated candidly. Without any intention to belittle me, I lowered my gaze in silence, diligently organizing my possessions. Humility mattered not. All these items were suitable for trade. In but a day, I would be on my way. As I continued to pack, a guard attending to Xie Jiuxiao informed me that Sang Yu had sent an old matron to instruct me on propriety before our arrival in the capital, to prevent any inadvertent faux pas with nobility. This matron, whom I recognized as Sang Yu's wet nurse, wore a kind countenance, but that facade waned in my presence. With an air of authority, she scrutinized me and proceeded to outline countless rules, insisting I learn them. With each bowl placed atop my head that fell, she eventually realized my disinterest. Her patience and the faint respect she harbored vanished, leaving her glaring at me in wrath. I am acquainted with Consort Rome. Had it been her teaching you, I assure you, I would not be so lenient. I have only ever instructed refined young ladies, never a village girl like you. You are the fifth prince's concubine. Any grievances must be endured. Endure? I had tolerated Xie Jiuxiao's indifference for 2 long years, and his demotion of my status to that of a concubine. Why should I bear such burdens? I replied coolly, I have yet to enter the estate. Thus I am not yet his concubine. These rules can be learned later. Whether I shall be present at that time is uncertain. My retort left the matron speechless, seething with indignation. Before half a day had passed, the guards and maidservants in my small courtyard were abuzz with tales of my defiance against the elder of the duke's household. I remained steadfast, until Xie Jiuxiao stormed in. His countenance darkened, and he barked, "Mu Shitong, can you not comprehend? Do not add to my troubles." I held my head high, puzzled by his words, my expression one of bewilderment. I had complied with his every wish these past few days. What further discontent could he possess? Sang Yu peeked from behind him, her eyes glistening like newly fallen rain. "Miss Mu, Gui Ma is my wet nurse. She has served in the duke's household for many years, and it is she who taught me etiquette. I merely wish for you to leave a favorable impression before the lady. I do not intend to make things difficult for you." Sang Yu approached, appearing as a caring sister, reaching out for my hand, but I instinctively withdrew. Hurt flickered across her face, and tears cascaded down her cheeks. Xie Jiuxiao's temper flared. "Have someone escort Miss Sang back." He gently soothed her as she departed. Once we were alone, Xie Jiuxiao stepped forward, grasping my wrist with a fierce grip, demanding, "What did you mean by that remark?" "What remark? What do you mean by whether I shall be present? Where else could you go if not with me? We have made our vows." He halted, realizing the implications of his words. He seemed assured that I had nowhere else to go, that I was bound to him. I fabricated a lie. That was merely a statement made in anger. He appeared to relax but still held my hand with a vice-like grip, causing me pain. His voice turned frigid, laden with disappointment. "Mu Shitong, your lineage is humble, and you are not even worthy of a secondary wife-as status. I could grant you the title of a favored concubine only through the influence of my mother and the duke's household. Do you have any idea how much I have defended you?" I forced a smile, my heart aching. He had never inquired whether I wished to be this favored concubine. He released me, straightened his sleeves, his eyes devoid of warmth. "You must obey. Once I marry you or upon our return to the capital, I shall welcome you into the household. Do not cause trouble, otherwise you will lose even the title of favored concubine and be relegated to mere concubine status." I lowered my gaze, my fingertips turning pale from the pressure, suppressing the bitterness rising within me. I replied hoarsely, "Understood." On the final day before leaving the capital, I retrieved the deed to my house and approached the merchant. I stated plainly, "How much can this house be sold for?" The shopkeeper, Aware of my identity as the woman who sold pancakes in the East Market and knowing Xie Jiuxiao was the fifth prince, greeted me with a warm smile, eager to engage in small talk. I averted my eyes, merely stating, regardless of the price, sell it immediately. You may collect the house the day after tomorrow. I shall not return thereafter. The shopkeeper nodded vigorously, even offering his congratulations. I sought a swift resolution, unwilling to haggle, and for the first time, I made it a losing transaction. I stepped out with the silver in hand. In July, the pomegranates blazed like fire along the banks of the Zhan River, where flowers bloomed in clusters. In a small pavilion, a pair of young lovers sat, the fire crackling, the aroma of tea wafting through the air. Sang Yu cradled several freshly picked pomegranate blossoms, while Xie Jiuxiao penned poetry on a silk fan. Sang Yu took it from him, bringing it to her nose to inhale the fragrance, the tinkling of her hair ornaments resonating softly. Xie Jiuxiao, seated opposite her, brushed away the fallen petals from her shoulders. It was a warmth and tenderness I had never known. In the past, I had suggested outings to admire the flowers, but he had always replied indifferently that he disliked such activities. At the time, I had naively believed him, but now, it was clear that it was not the flowers he detested, but rather the company he preferred to avoid. I felt like an unrefined individual, as if appreciating flowers with me was akin to playing the lute to a cow. I could not compare to the well-read Sang Yu. In recent days, I had been unable to see Xie Jiuxiao. They were frolicking in the winds and chasing the moon. I stood quietly behind a tree, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. I lowered my head, swallowing back the sorrow. Xie Jiuxiao paused, glancing in my direction, but I quickly averted my gaze, pretending not to notice. The crowd bustled around me. I was but a face in the throng, insignificant. Fifth brother? Sang Yu called out sweetly. Xie Jiuxiao feigned ignorance of my presence. The day of our departure dawned with splendid weather, perfectly coinciding with a lively temple fair. The atmosphere was vibrant and bustling. Yet this lively scene bears no relevance to me. I, accompanied only by a young maid, methodically loaded the carriage with my belongings. Box after box, item after item. The carriage brimmed with goods, leaving scarcely any room to sit. The little maid murmured her complaints about my excessive baggage, lamenting her misfortune of enduring this toil under the sweltering July sun. You may return to Miss Sang's side. I am not accustomed to being attended by others. After dismissing the maid, Xie Jiuxiao made an appearance. He stood beside the carriage, casting a glance at my overstuffed vehicle, his brow furrowed, and coldly inquired, "Was this intentional?" I pursed my lips and refrained from replying, for I knew he had more to say. "Do not forget, you are merely a concubine. You cannot travel with me, and you are. Do not fuss. This is the rule," he added. I shook my head, indicating I would not create a scene. "I shall ride with the coachman. I am a merchant's daughter. I am used to it." He proceeded northward to the capital, while I walked west towards the west gate. Our paths were inherently divergent. Xie Jiuxiao's expression was as frigid as the ice of March as he waved his sleeve and departed. "Do as you wish." Miss Sang finally emerged amidst calls, surrounded by her attendants like planets orbiting the sun. They carefully assisted her into the carriage, while my side remained desolate. I had even sent away my sole maid. The coachman, seated atop the carriage, hesitated before speaking Mississippi. I gracefully leapt onto the carriage, settling beside the coachman, and softly instructed, "Proceed slowly. There is no rush." The wheels clattered as we made our way toward the city gates. My heavily laden carriage moved particularly slowly. In my line of sight, Xie Jiuxiao's carriage receded farther away. Initially, he had instructed the coachman to halt and wait for me, urging me several times to hasten, so as not to lose him. The coachman thumped his chest, asserting, "There is but one official road to the capital. We cannot lose our way." Miss Sang lifted the carriage curtain, revealing a gleeful face as she exclaimed, "Fifth brother, let us hurry. We might catch the blooming wheat flowers in the capital." Upon hearing this, Xie Jiuxiao could not help but quicken his pace, and the horses galloped faster. The city gates teemed with traffic, carriages, donkey carts, pedestrians, and porters, before we managed to squeeze through. Unbeknownst to Xie Jiuxiao, none of the carriages following along the official road was mine. As I saw his carriage growing ever distant, the coachman cracked the whip, urging the horses onward. "Miss, hold steady." Yet, I seized the reins, retrieving a silver ingot from my bosom. Thank you for your efforts. I shall continue on my own from here. The coachman, being hired, accepted the payment without further inquiry and dismounted. I turned the carriage around and headed westward, on the official road leading to Changyang Pass. My father and several associates had been waiting for quite some time under the blazing sun, growing somewhat restless. My father remained composed as ever. Have you arrived? I replied with a simple, yes, and then tears began to flow uncontrollably. Typically loquacious, he now seemed somewhat reticent. Ordinarily, he would scold me, but the past could not be revisited, and further words would be futile. My father, always magnanimous, did not dwell on the past, but inquired about the future. Daughter, let us depart. Aside from the initial discomfort of setting out, I quickly acclimated. We journeyed westward. The great river surged, the mountains loomed majestically, and we ultimately passed through Changyang Pass. Beyond Yang Pass, there are no familiar faces. My father excitedly remarked that with the two nations now on amicable terms and trade established, there were many treasures beyond the pass. This was our chance to prosper. Beyond the pass lay the vast desert, the lonely smoke rising, and the sun setting over the long river. I had encountered the green-eyed denizens of the western regions, and the melons that grew in the Gobi were sweet to the point of being cloying. Standing atop a sand dune, I felt as insignificant as a grain of sand. My father approached, exhaling a puff of smoke, and asked, "Are you thinking of that person?" I shook my head. I felt a sense of relief that I had not returned to the capital with Xie Jiuxiao, where the confines of the courtyard would leave me perpetually anxious, pondering whether he cared for me. Here, however, the sky was vast, and the world was expansive. My trifling worries had long been relegated to a small corner of my heart. I smiled and said, "Daughter is thinking, if we earn a fortune on this trip, might father find me a stepmother?" My father coughed lightly. "Dare you jest with your father?" Yet he mused that finding me a husband could indeed be considered. On the first day of our journey to the capital, the night was aglow with flickering lights. Xie Jiuxiao stood at the entrance of the inn, assisting Miss Sang down from the carriage. After a moment of hesitation, he turned to the carriage at the rear. In recent days, he had been cold toward Mu Shitong, his words somewhat harsh. She was perceptive. Perhaps she was still miffed at him. Yet he did not wish for it to be this way. However, with Sang Yu present, she was his fiancée, and he had to take that into account. "Shitong, we have arrived at the inn. Let us make do here for the night." Xie Jiuxiao knocked on the carriage wood. A man emerged. It was then that Xie Jiuxiao suddenly realized that the coachman was not the one he had hired, nor was the carriage Mu Shitong's. Staring at the wheel tracks on the ground, he began to panic. Carriages passed by, one after another, and he stood at the door, scrutinizing each one, yet none belonged to me. His unease grew. "I told her not to bring so many things. She insisted on it. I said I would buy for her in the capital. It should not have delayed our progress." Xie Jiuxiao began to pace, his words sounding like a monologue, yet also a complaint directed at the maid beside him. The maid timidly lowered her head, too fearful to speak. Miss Sang emerged from the inn, somewhat displeased, casting a glance at the elderly matron beside her. The matron stepped forward slowly, saying, "Your Highness, I understand your concern for Miss Mu, but she is merely a concubine. It is improper for you to wait at the door for her. If word gets out, it could be turned against you. Forgive this old servant for speaking out of turn. Your foundation is still unstable, and you must prioritize the greater picture." Miss Sang, ever considerate, inquired, "Shall we send someone to search for her?" Xie Jiuxiao inhaled deeply, calming his expression, and coldly retorted, "She is merely a concubine. We must not allow her to gain too much leverage. Otherwise, if she rides roughshod over you, that would be my fault." Miss Sang smiled faintly. The next day, as we set forth, Xie Jiuxiao deliberately slowed our pace, whether intentionally or not. At night, we camped by the roadside. Xie Jiuxiao looked back with a longing gaze. The silence was profound, the starlight faint. He awaited her arrival. Xie Jiuxiao's expression grew colder, and he finally spoke slowly, "Someone, go find her." Each word seemed to be forced from between his teeth. Xie Jiuxiao's instructions were to search along the official road and side paths all the way back to Pingliang town, urging the horses to gallop. The guards, diligent in their duty, returned within a day with news. "Miss Mu has left." Left. What did that mean? The two brief words struck Xie Juxiao like a blow, rendering him breathless. He instantly panicked, his form swaying, nearly losing his balance. What trick is she playing now? He muttered to himself. Fixing his gaze on the guard, he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, his fingers aching from the strain. The guard trembled as he presented a letter. It was one I had left for the coachman. If anyone came searching, they were to deliver the letter. If not, it could be burned or discarded as they saw fit. Xie Juxiao, with trembling hands, accepted the letter. He read it swiftly. The letter bore water stains, with sporadic droplets smudging it, making it somewhat unsightly, but not impeding comprehension. My words were few. It began with a line of poetry, as white as snow on the mountain, as bright as the moon in the clouds, having heard of your dual intentions. I come to make a clean break. I would not resort to flowery language. My name is not on the jade butterfly, since we cannot be considered a legitimate couple. I shall not accompany you to the capital. Had I known you had a fiancé years ago, I would never have entangled myself with you. From this day forth, with mountains high and rivers wide, let us lead our separate lives, each to our own marriages, with no relation to one another. A thin letter, containing but a few succinct sentences. Xie Juxiao meticulously read each word, an overwhelming sense of emptiness engulfing his heart. A slender twig seemed to pierce his very soul, invoking a profound and agonizing pain. In disbelief, he seized the reins from the attendant and mounted his steed. Sangyu stumbled down from the carriage, hastily pursuing him. Blocking his path, "Fifth brother, we cannot delay any longer. The edict proclaiming your elevation to king awaits in the capital. Moreover, we have the formal decree granting our marriage." She grasped a corner of Xie Juxiao's garment, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Fifth brother, isn't it fortuitous that she has departed? Miss Mu wished to fulfill our union." Her eyes were red-rimmed as she slowly withdrew her grip. The white horse galloped forth, and Sangyu pursued for a few steps before falling heavily. "Fifth brother." Her heart was shattered. "Fifth brother, do not abandon me." Yet, Xie Juxiao heard nothing. A throng of attendants mounted their steeds and fervently gave chase. He rode through the moonlit night with reckless abandon, his hairpin dislodged, his garments torn by branches, yet he paid no heed. He had galloped 2 miles when he found his path obstructed by the Luo River. The river was perilous, forbidding passage across the bridge at night. Its waters roared with fury, tumultuous waves crashing. He gazed back at the long road he had traversed, gripping the reins tightly until his hands ached.
Shitong.
Mu Shitong was a traveling merchant, a wanderer without a fixed abode. She had departed, her whereabouts as vast as the world itself, and he knew not where to begin his search. Suddenly, rain began to fall, a gentle patter upon his face, mingling with his tears. That year, amidst the apricot blossoms and gentle rain, she had saved him from the mire. That year, when the crabapples bloomed after the Qingming rain, they had wed in a modest countryside courtyard. He had vowed, through life and death, we shall be together. This year, they parted, leaving an abyss of uncertainty. Even in life, such bonds could evoke profound heartache. The attendants caught up, and Sangyu, in tears, followed suit. The rain intensified, creating a cacophony yet also an eerie stillness. He had once believed that marrying Mu Shitong was merely a means to repay her life-saving grace. He even felt a sense of humiliation. Coldness and distance were the prices she should bear. He thought that granting her the position of a favored concubine was the greatest fortune she could receive, one for which she should be eternally grateful. Only in this way could he alleviate a fraction of his guilt toward Sangyu. He deceived himself into believing he did not love Mu Shitong. Yet now, in her absence, he realized she had taken his heart with her. I accompanied my father to the western regions, to Lulan and to numerous other places. We traded silk and spices from the central plains, returning with cattle, sheep, furs, and precious stones. The border thrived and my father's trade expanded, making him the largest merchant at the frontier. That year, he secured a lucrative contract from the imperial merchants to supply furs and jewels to the royal family. Unwilling to trust the task to his employees, he took me along to oversee the delivery. This was my first visit to the capital, a place bustling with charm. We were received at the inn by the imperial merchants, overseen by the 5th prince, Xie Juxiao, who was now the king of Yen. This was our first meeting in 3 years. He stood before the merchant house, tall and elegant amidst the apricot blossoms and drizzling rain, still exuding an air of proud nobility, though his cheekbones were more pronounced, and he had become considerably thinner. His lips moved slightly, his eyes sparkling. Shitong, I have searched for you for so long. His voice was somewhat hoarse, imbued with a lingering affection. Yet, upon seeing him now, the flutter of youthful infatuation and apprehension had faded, leaving me in serene composure. I performed the customary greeting, Your Highness. Xie Jiuxiao swallowed hard. His expression pained. There is no need for such formality. He gazed at me, his eyes brimming with deep emotion. I did not marry Sangyu. She is merely a side consort. My rightful consort's position has always been reserved for you. Shitong, will you return home with me? He explained that during those years of decline, he was the most powerless among the princes. The concubine Rong was not his biological mother, and he could only rely on the influence of the Duke of Sang to establish his foothold in court. His eyes glistened with moisture. Shitong, you have always been in my heart. In the past, I was unable to see clearly and wronged you. I slightly turned my head, gazing into the vast azure sky. I replied with his own words, We lack a matchmaker and formal engagement. We are not husband and wife, as you have said. I am but a commoner, destined to be merely a concubine, as you stated. These words I had harbored for many years. With each recollection, resentment would resurface. Yet, as time passed, grievances dissipated. I felt neither sorrow nor joy. Xie Jiuxiao, when I suggested you marry me back then, it was merely a jest. Truthfully, had you claimed to have a fiancé, I would not have pressed you. Now, it is but a reversal of a wrong path. Xie Jiuxiao's face drained of color, as if something within him had shattered. His fingertips trembled as he staggered back a step, his gaze clouded and desolate, reminiscent of the bleak west wind. He uttered, I cannot believe it. Your arrival in the capital indicates that you still harbor feelings for me. I felt a chill, pulling my fur cloak closer, calmly stating, Merchants prioritize profit. There is no business that cannot be conducted. If it is business, I can discuss trade with you, but as a court official, it would be best to avoid too many private meetings. With that, I turned and returned to the inn, closing the door behind me. I picked up the account book, engrossed in its contents. Outside, all commotion paled in comparison to the importance of my records. This batch of furs sent to the palace was exceptionally valuable. The Empress Dowager expressed a particular fondness for them, instructing the imperial merchants to have me deliver the goods to the palace. In the imperial garden, the empresses and noble women gathered. Concubine Rong, Xie Jiuxiao's foster mother, was also present. Her countenance was pale and unremarkable, merely casting a fleeting glance in my direction. Devoid of emotion. After years of palace intrigue, perhaps all her edges had been smoothed away. Sangyu stood beside Concubine Rong. As a side consort, she lacked the standing to sit alongside the concubine and instead stood to the side, awaiting her mother-in-law's beckoning. Her eyes were cast down, her demeanor forlorn, resembling a once vibrant flower now shrouded in dust. I felt the weight of various scrutinizing gazes upon me. It was no secret that Xie Jiuxiao had married during his exile in Shu, yet his wife had not returned with him to the capital. Originally the primary consort, Sangyu had been relegated to a side consort due to my presence. Some whispered of her jealousy and narrow-mindedness, unable to accept a concubine, while others deemed me a commoner with delusions of grandeur. Speculation abounded regarding Xie Jiuxiao's affections, whether deep or fickle. All were assessing me, yet a tacit understanding prevailed, with no one daring to broach the past. I remained oblivious to their prying gazes, walking directly to the empresses to present my wares, detailing their origins, quality, and unique features. As I spoke with fervor, I also shared tales of the western regions. The favored concubine, captivated by my stories of distant lands, approached and interrupted, asking, Tell me, I've heard that Lulan has singing sands. Have you seen it? What is it truly like? Does the sand really sing? How could a woman venture so far? What other places have you been? The favored concubine insisted on bestowing me a seat, which I politely declined. There were too many tales from beyond the borders. I smiled, recounting, the sand does not sing. Rather, the desert is filled with peculiar stones. When the wind rises, the wind and sand pass through these stones, producing sounds that vary with the seasons. The favored concubine listened, enraptured. The palace ladies, confined within the palace walls for a lifetime, were particularly intrigued by tales from outside. Even Concubine Rome, who usually remained aloof, drew closer to listen intently. Meanwhile, Sangyu continued to stand obediently to the side, feeling neglected. It was only when a palace attendant reminded us that the palace gates were about to close that everyone began to disperse. Throughout the encounter, Concubine Rome did not trouble me. As I was about to leave, she called me aside, casually remarking, "You are more fortunate than I. You have chosen the right path." Sangyu and I exited the palace simultaneously. She obstructed my path, her resentment palpable. "On what grounds do you claim that 2 mere words from you can bring joy to the Empress Mother, while no matter my actions, she remains displeased?" I smiled with a hint of resignation and replied, "I am a merchant, accustomed to greeting others with a smile. I say whatever pleases my guests. It is as simple as that. There is no ulterior motive." She bit her cheek, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and bitterly exclaimed, "You left. Yet why did you return to provoke Xie Juxiao? It is all your fault. I am clearly his wife." Sangyu relentlessly voiced her grievances. Deeply aggrieved that I had leveraged kindness to compel Xie Juxiao to marry me, thus becoming a stumbling block and thorn between them. She resented me for having ventured far away, stealing his heart, leading to a lingering yearning that could never be fulfilled. Just as Xie Juxiao had once neglected me, he now turned his cold shoulder to her. With tear-filled eyes, Sangyu lamented, "I simply liked him. Have I erred?" I gathered my sleeves, replying helplessly, "You are placing your blame on the wrong person. Your engagement was never truly severed. His silence back then was a deception directed at both you and me." Sangyu halted her tears, frozen in disbelief. "He exploited me to secure a place to live, then turned to you to establish his foothold in the capital." I lowered my gaze. I departed only after seeing the truth. As Sangyu's bewildered expression lingered, I climbed into the carriage. Xie Juxiao sought me out several times. Each time I had my maid decline. The maid, fearful of offending the prince, accepted a cluster of plum blossoms and timidly placed them on my desk, saying, "Lord Yan has mentioned that the plum blossoms in the outskirts are in full bloom and invites you to view them. He will not leave until you do." I cast a glance, my heart devoid of any stirrings. On that day, Xie Juxiao stood alone in the wind, waiting for what felt like an eternity. The breeze scattered the blossoms, clouding his vision and reddening his eyes. He waited from dawn till dusk, yet he would not see me. Having successfully concluded my business in the capital, I earned a substantial profit. Before departing, I busied myself with procuring various goods that could fetch a good price beyond the borders. Upon returning home, I collapsed onto a chair in exhaustion. At that moment, the maid presented me with an exquisite box, bowing her head and smiling awkwardly. "Miss, this is a gift from Lord Yan." I dared not refuse, so I accepted it on your behalf. I opened the box, expecting something valuable, but it contained merely a copper hairpin, identical to one he had gifted me in the past. Now, this pin was solemnly placed within a lacquered box. I had returned many of the gifts Xie Juxiao sent me, and this pin was no exception. The day before my departure from the capital, Sangyu came to see me, her face marred with clear handprints. The cause was her realization of Xie Juxiao's relentless attempts to win my favor, which triggered an outburst of resentment and grievances, culminating in a fierce argument where, in a moment of anger, he struck her. Following this incident, Xie Juxiao's cold indifference persisted, tears rolling down her cheeks drop by drop. Sangyu choked back her sobs, her vulnerability palpable. I was wrong in the past. Now I am tasting the bitterness. "Miss Mu, I will relinquish my position as the primary wife to you and no longer vie for his affection. Please stay." I regarded her, a hint of amusement bubbling within me. "Did he send you as a messenger?" Upon being called out, Sangyu's expression turned desolate, and with a mix of bitterness and sorrow, she nodded, her tears flowing more freely. I sighed. "The more inexpensive your affection, the more he will trample upon it. Miss Sang, you were originally the legitimate daughter of a noble house, sought after by many suitors in the capital. You should not be the one to plead with me." Sangyu stood rooted to the spot before burying her face in her hands and weeping. On the day I left the capital, Xie Juxiao appeared. He rode in on horseback, unable to mask his excitement. He knelt before the emperor for an entire day and night, even willing to exchange his royal title for an imperial decree to wed me, a commoner, as his legitimate wife. Xie Jiuxiao cautiously extended the decree towards me, his gaze fixed on mine, humble and hoarse. Shitong, once your name is inscribed, you shall be my rightful wife. Please do not leave. I gently pushed it back. In that instant, everything crumbled in his eyes, and darkness descended upon his expression. I calmly stated, "Why can you not understand?" His face drained of color, lips trembling. I paused before continuing. "I no longer harbor feelings for you. I have grown fond of the begonia blossoms of Jiangnan, the sour apricots of the northwest, and the mare's milk wine beyond the borders. There are too many things I cherish, leaving no space for you." I turned my gaze towards those behind him, where Sang Yu wept inconsolably. "But there are those whose hearts are filled to the brim with thoughts of you. Yet you have betrayed one after another." With that, I signaled for the driver to proceed. The carriage slowly rolled away, and as I lifted the curtain, I caught sight of Xie Jiuxiao still standing there, understanding fully. I would not look back. This parting might very well be our last. Years passed. Sang Yu eventually achieved her heart's desire, ascending to the position of Yan Wangfei. The emperor, in pursuit of a continuation of the royal lineage, suggested that the princes take concubines to bear children, yet several princes rejected the notion, citing marital harmony. Only Xie Jiuxiao accepted, with Sang Yu personally selecting 2 suitable concubines for him, sweet and charming young women from reputable families. Sang Yu was his youthful muse, the one who had once invested genuine affection, employing all means to secure his heart, her eyes and heart solely focused on him. She displayed neither joy nor sorrow as she welcomed the concubines, her etiquette impeccable. Xie Jiuxiao had initially anticipated that Sang Yu would employ some cunning to refuse the idea of concubinage. He asked in frustration, "Are you not even jealous?" He seemed somewhat anxious. "If you express a desire for me not to take concubines, I will refuse the emperor's request." Sang Yu pondered with lowered eyes, then smiled softly. "That would only bring heartache. With the emperor's numerous offspring, to stand out and maintain the prestige of the Yan Wangfu, it was essential to appease those in power. In such matters, romantic affections seemed as ephemeral as clouds." Xie Jiuxiao suddenly realized that he was losing one thing after another. "Do you not love me anymore?" Many years later, I returned to the capital for business. Xie Jiuxiao no longer crossed my path. Instead, Sang Yu sought me out for a reunion. I carried home some pancakes, a gentle smile gracing my face, concealing a sense of calmness and ambition. Now, she was the emperor's most favored daughter-in-law, clever and poised, handling affairs with great prudence. She declared that she had found her own path. Men are often fickle, especially those of royal blood. She sought only to secure her position as the primary wife, grasping tightly to power, for that was something no one could take from her. Meanwhile, Xie Jiuxiao remained, at his core, a romantic young man, indecisive in governance and having accomplished little. Gradually, he was overshadowed by the other princes. When others spoke of Yan Wang, they would inevitably think of Yan Wangfei. I raised my teacup, taking a delicate sip, and we exchanged smiles. The end of the tale. Thank you for listening.
And until we meet again in the next story.